I'm joined today by the senator from District 13, Nampa, Brian Lenney. So without any further ado, Brian, what's the journey of your life that brought you to the point where you're not only in the Senate, but now you're running for re-election?
I didn't know when I was supposed to say hi because I was drinking my coffee out of my favorite coffee mug, by the way, because it's orange and white and it's a great organization. Citizens, I'm not paid to say this, Citizens United for Privacy
Pe-
Foundation.
People United for Privacy Foundation.
People, did I say people? Yeah, I'm still drinking the coffee too. It's late nights and early mornings. I need a lot of coffee. People United for Privacy. Anyway, so moved to, thanks for having me on, by the way. I moved to Nampa, Idaho in 2010, so roughly 14 years ago from Southern California, um, with zero political ambition. I moved to Idaho from California for the same reason a lot of people move here, to get the hell out of California. And so I've been in Nampa 14 years, and it wasn't until the COVID crisis. I refuse to call it a pandemic. Well, the real pandemic, I like to say, is that we're run by a corrupt bureaucratic empire. That's the real pandemic that's still happening. But during the COVID crisis, I kind of like a lot of people got my eyes opened and became aware of what was going on, not just in DC, but in every single state capital in the nation. And I became interested in doing something about it. And so I said, well, screw it. I'm going to run for something. What should I run for? City Council, House of Representatives, Senate sounds good. And that's what I did. And here I am. That's this ultra short version, but I'm sure we'll unpack that.
Yeah, well, there is a lot to unpack there. I think you surprised a lot of people 2 years ago, running against, somebody who had been in office for a while and had risen to a position of, a pretty powerful leadership. Uh, and then you come basically out of nowhere and you win. And, well, the rest is history. I think it's safe to say that you're, very outspoken. There's no political filter, turning your ideas into something that's been passed through focus groups and stuff like a lot of people do when they get into office. There's no
You're not
question there,
wrong.
but
No, you're not wrong there. It's a problem. I mean, you could use your powers for good or evil. So it's a problem I've had. The no filter thing, it's a lifelong thing, but it can be used for good. And I think that resonates with people. I did come out of nowhere when I beat the in 2022 when I beat the other guy. Um, his own city doesn't know him even really still now, but I was just some random guy, never held political office. I've always been interested in politics like a lot of people, but I was mostly following the stuff that goes on in DC, like Joe Biden and what's going on in the White House and how the neocons are trying to police the world and bring us into World War III. So the state political stuff, I really just kind of kept at a distance, like I said, until the pandemic. But I think what resonates with people now, as Nampa's conservative senator and member of the Idaho Freedom Caucus, very conservative, hardline group. What resonates with people is I'm just it sounds cliche, but it really is true. I'm just a normal guy, I'm not some polished politician. I'm just a regular person, just like anyone else who lives in Idaho. You know, I'm a conservative guy. I'm a Christian. I'm not a big fan of government intrusion into our lives, unnecessary government intrusion. I'm just a regular guy, and I think people saw that. It sounds weird saying this about myself, but it's true. I think people saw that in 2022, that a vote for me was a vote for them, because I'm like them and I care about the same things they do. We can't, I mean, right now we're dealing with people can't afford groceries or gas or housing or property taxes. These things affect me too. A lot of people in the state house don't even have a mortgage. You know what I mean? You have a lot of very well-off, wealthy people in the state house who are distant from the people. And that's not me. I'm with the people. I'm one of the people. I care about the same things as like the average Idahoan, and I think people appreciate that.
I think the you know, COVID lockdowns really woke a lot of people up to the importance of local government. It wasn't Congress or the president or, those guys who locked us down. I mean, they may have advocated it, but it was carried out, by our governor, our legislature in some ways, by not stepping in and stopping it, by health districts. So I think that made people realize how important it is to get involved in local government and redirected a lot of that energy. But there's still a lot, still a lot of folks, a lot of voters out there who they just, watch Fox News or, CNN if they're on the other side, I guess, and aren't really tuned in. Then they go to the polls, in May, and if they even vote, you know, they really don't know how to vote. It's name recognition or, somebody that they know. How do you reach, those people with your message?
Yeah. So most people don't vote in primaries, and I don't think that's unique to Nampa or Canyon County or Idaho. I think that's a political problem that most people don't care, don't pay attention, don't want to get involved until it hits their kitchen table, until it hits their bank account at the gas pump when they're paying their property tax bill. Um, we like getting, if I had the answer to how do we get people out there and get a higher voter turnout, I'd be a billionaire, but what we do to kind of connect with the normal people is kind of the basic grassroots stuff that typically the Democrats and liberals are very good at: door knocking, having community events, going to the farmers market, um, meeting people for coffee. Those one-on-one conversations are really helpful. But at the end of the day, um, digital social media is still a thing. Obviously, I'm very active on X, formerly known as Twitter, and Facebook. Facebook's kind of a dumpster fire. It doesn't really get any traction, as we know, because they throttle conservatives and you don't get any reach. But I try to just, at the end of the day, I put myself out there in real life, in person, very active in the small business community. We're knocking doors, talking to people, all that, and at the end, and putting our message out there on email, social media. And I think at the end of the day, it just comes down to people. I'm presenting a very clear choice, right, for voters. And the clear choice is between an establishment Republican. It's the same. The guy running against me is the same guy I beat last time. So I guess he's coming back for the revenge tour. But the choice really is between an establishment Republican, a guy who carries water for the governor, who loves that whole thing, like head pats from the governor and meeting with lobbyists, and like he's a yes man, and then that's him. And myself, I'm a member of the Idaho Freedom Caucus. We're kind of birthed from the same, what do you say that's not vulgar? Birthed from the same, we have the same roots as, like, people see the House Freedom Caucus in Congress. We're connected to that. And I'm a very outspoken conservative. I haven't even met the governor, and if that tells you something, like I haven't even met the governor in 2 years. I've seen him in a room, and I walked by him on the stairs once, but he's not interested in calling me into his office and giving me orders, because he knows I won't follow them. Because I'm more interested in protecting constitutional rights. I'm more interested in fiscal responsibility. I'm more interested in fixing education, both public, private, and pushing school choice, and protecting kids and families. So I'm just a grassroots, old school conservative. The other guy is a kind of establishment yes man. That's the choices. That's the choice Nampa has, and that's the choice they had last time. And Nampa, I won every precinct. So a lot of people in 2022, the guy I'm running against, a 500th generation Idahoan. I think he was here before the Native Americans were even here. That's how old school Idahoan he is. He didn't even win his own neighborhood. You know what I mean? Like, I won every precinct. I won by over 15%. And that was 2022. Now I have the whole world against me. So we'll see what happens in a couple weeks, you know?
Well, I was taking notes here because there's so many things to talk about, and my notepad is also People United for Privacy. There, good
Yeah,
organization.
nice. We're
That
not
being
paid sponsors. We just happen, I just literally grabbed this coffee cup and I happen to be drinking out of it. But it is a great cup and a great organization. So anyway.
so, I guess I'll start with the fact that like you mentioned, this is a rematch of 2 years ago. There's a couple races throughout the state where this is the case. Um, in 2022, you were the outsider running against the incumbent who's been there a while. He has a record. You can point to his record and say, this is why we need some change. Now the shoe's on the other foot. He's able to come and point to your record for better or for worse and say, this is why you need to put me back. How has that changed the way you communicate with people, if it has?
So it kind of has, right? Because I mean, it's just a different dynamic. So now instead of me, you know, attacking the incumbent, now I'm like you said, I'm the guy in the seat. So I try to so for let me back this up. So I'm just me, right? Like I know people are supposed to say you should never, if you're the incumbent, you should never do X, Y, and Z, and you should never say this, this, and this. I'm like, I'm just gonna be me. I'm gonna say what I think is necessary and address things I think are necessary and let the chips fall where they may. And Nampa has a decision to make, just like everyone in Idaho has a decision to make to either like what I say and vote me in or tell me to get the hell out and vote me out. And either way, I leave with integrity because I'm just me. I'm going to be me, and people either like it or they don't like it. But I do have a very conservative voting record now. So, you know, I'm not just running against, here's a dynamic that's like a backdrop that you've highlighted, I think, like really well on your blog. Not just my race, but just the whole state. You've done more investigative journalism than like people at like Dateline NBC. Like I think people who haven't really dug into your blog and read it really should, because you do some amazing work. But the backdrop that's different in 2024 versus 2 years ago is 2 years ago it was just me versus the other guy, right? And that was pretty easy. I did that with like one hand tied behind my back, because he's a very moderate. He's very moderate Republican. Just to be frank, we agree on a lot of issues and we disagree on a lot of issues. But as a very principled conservative, it was very easy to take him down because there's a lot of low hanging fruit, So I just went for that. So the difference now in 2024, it's Brian Lenney versus the entire establishment system. And that's, I just had someone message me right now, as I haven't looked at this article. Someone just messaged me right now when we were talking, saying, I just read an article saying the Idaho Education Association spent $34,000 for your opponent and 17,000 against you. Something, I don't know if that's true. I just got the message, but we know that there's all these PACs that you can trace the money back to the executive office, as you've highlighted on your blog and other people have highlighted. There's hundreds, there's well over $100,000 has been spent against me in the last 6 months, because they don't want me in office. They want someone they can control. They want someone who's a good soldier and a yes man rubber stamper. And that's not me. So the messaging, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, is my messaging is kind of the same. And I have a very conservative voting record I can point to. Whereas before I just said, here's what I would do if I was in office. Well, now I did it. I spent 2 years doing all the conservative things. But like I said, now it's me against the establishment and the system. I don't have a campaign manager. I write all my own letters and emails. I do 100% of my campaign stuff. I write my own mailers. I do everything myself, versus this, people with essentially endless amounts of money. But my messaging is pretty much still the same. Do you want a guy who votes like a California Democrat, the other guy, or do you want me? And that messaging hasn't changed. Just some of the dynamics have.
Well, you mentioned some of the attacks against you there. You have the Idaho Liberty PAC, which has taken money through, various points from the governor's office, or not his office, but his PACs, in addition to all the other establishment groups and, big business, big lobby groups. Over the off season, you were stripped of your vice chairmanship of a committee because, well, I guess because you've been too outspoken. It really seems, you said, Brian Lenney versus the establishment. It really seems that you are probably the number one target of, the political establishment. And I guess in the way it's flattering, but do you think you can win that battle?
We'll find out in less than 3 weeks. I think probably the top, when you follow the money, right? People, if you follow the money, it's just the most ridiculous stuff being put out against me that's literally makes me laugh. Like I don't get offended or like lose sleep. I'm just like, do people really believe this crap? But I think following the money myself, here's who I think, here's who the top targets are, not who I think. It's just, you just look at dollars spent against us. So for people who don't know this, when these out of state, not even out of state, well, out of state and in state, when political action committees spend money for or against a candidate, they have to report it. So it'll be, they'll say, I spent $34,000 against Brian Lenney. I spent 70, and I spent X amount in support of, this yes man NPC robot candidate over here. So they have to report for and against, and it's all public knowledge. I don't have the time to look it up right now, but I'm going to do it at some point. Maybe I'll wait till after the election, whether I win or lose. I'm curious to see how much has been spent against me. But top targets are, by money spent, myself and Scott Herndon, I think, are probably the top two. They're spending way more money against Herndon and for his opponent, Liberal Jim, than they are against me. But myself and Herndon, it seems like, it feels like, and looking at the money, are the top targets. Senator Tammy Nichols, she's in Middleton. Senator Herndon's up north in District 1, I believe, right? Up by Canada. So myself, and it's all senators. Myself, Scott Herndon, Senator Nichols, Senator Zeiderveld, she's in the Twin Falls area, and Senator Trakel in Caldwell. We're all getting stupid amounts of money spent against us and in support of our opponents. So can I win? I don't know. They did this. People say, how's the campaign going? It's like, well, we're doing all the stuff, we're knocking doors, we're putting our messaging out, we're doing all the things we should be doing, but is it enough? I don't know, because I don't know if these like 1980s attack ads that they're running against me work, or if people see right through them. A lot of people see right through them. I get messages, text messages, emails, voicemails, phone calls every day from like people I don't know in my district saying, hey, these like college kids from Utah came up and they like read a script at like, hello. It's like that pathetic. They get paid $1.50 for every door they knock on one of the groups, and they read a script, and he's like, they're basically trying to say you're some like California liberal or something like that. But I could tell they didn't know what they were talking about. And I went and did my research, and I found out, oh, actually you're the guy, you're really conservative, and I'm going to vote for you. So I don't know if it's going to work or not. It seems like, just from my kind of subjective take on it, it seems like, I don't know if this much money has been spent in Idaho, in an Idaho primary before, like on like attack ads and all these lies and stuff like that. So I don't know if it's going to work, but they did this in Colorado in 2000, the early 2000s. Colorado was kind of where, in my opinion, where we're at now as a state. Colorado was a red state, and they did this same thing, and they flipped it blue in 2004. And that's where I feel like we're at as a state. There's lawsuits, there's attack ads, there's mudslinging. I know that's always been in politics, but there's a very intentional effort to flip our state blue right now, like they did to Colorado in 2004. So we'll see if it works. I don't know. It's new territory for me.
Well, the whole Rocky Mountain heist, Gem State heist thing. I guess my question is, why would Republicans go along with efforts to turn the state blue? Now, I think the more establishment moderate Republicans, their line is that no, what's actually going to turn Idaho blue is political extremism. It's right-wing extremists who drive voters away from the Republican Party and into the arms of the Democrats. But then, conservatives turn around and say, no, it's compromise, it's moderation, it's trying to move the Republican Party to the left to the point where there's virtually no difference between the parties. So, which perspective is right, and why are Republicans going along with this, and how do we stop it?
Dude, you got me. I don't know. I mean, I think that, well, I know that I don't know how we stop it. Uh, because it seems to be the way the world goes. Like we have a fake president sitting in the Oval Office. We couldn't stop that. Um, there's a lot of political turmoil, not just in Idaho, but in our country. And I think we're at kind of a tipping point where we're either going to go all the way down the rabbit hole into this like dystopian nightmare, or people are going to wake up and we're going to have kind of a revival. I go back and forth
Hmm.
on these things. I mean, political extremism today was just normal Republican conservative values 20 years ago. I think we saw a shift under, I think it started under Barack Obama, in my view. He got elected with the stated goal to fundamentally transform the United States of America. And hell, it's working. Um, and I think that trickles down into, uh, the states, that it started kind of in Washington, D.C., the swampiness, and that trickles down into the states. And it's not just political, it's cultural. We're in the midst of a cultural revolution. People talk about the culture war as, oh, we have all these culture war. We're literally in a culture war. It's an actual war. People aren't getting shot and dying. And I mean, it's not a military engagement, but we are in a culture war. So I guess the real question is, who's going to win? Because politics is downstream from culture. So people are at war in the culture, that leaks into politics. The corrupt swampiness from DC trickles down to the states. So that's what we're dealing with is I think a spiritual war. We have good versus evil. We have wickedness versus righteousness, and people pick their sides. In the end, I think God wins, right? The Bible already tells us the ending. God wins in the end, but I guess depending on your eschatological persuasions, we're either things are gonna get really bad and then God's gonna come back, or things are gonna get really good, then Jesus is gonna return. Who knows how it's gonna shake out? But I
No,
don't know, man. I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to fix it. I mean, we still got the Clintons running around and Obama. Like no one goes to jail for these things. Hunter Biden's still free. So who knows how it's all going to shake out? I don't know why a conservative would go along with this Gym State heist stuff, but we have a lot of Republicans who aren't conservative. So, but it's not extremism. Like there's nothing extreme about protecting constitutional rights. There's nothing extreme about fiscal transparency. There's nothing extreme about restoring quality education. There's nothing extreme about protecting kids and families. But it shows you, I think, how far our culture has moved to the left and how degenerate just overall American culture has become, that those things would be considered extreme.
yeah.
Sorry, that was a mouthful. I just verbally threw up on you. I apologize.
No, that's good. I asked a very open-ended, multifaceted question, and so that's what comes out. You mentioned earlier that you're a member of the Idaho Freedom Caucus, which is, it's not just in Idaho; it's a network of different freedom caucuses throughout the country in different state legislatures. Because you're talking about the national issues, Obama, the Clintons. I don't think there's anything we can do to change what's going on at the national level, but we can at the state level. So it's been interesting to watch that process. However, I was at a candidate forum a few weeks ago, and one of the representatives from your district actually, he just kind of denounced the idea of caucuses, of factions. He said that it's not necessary, it's antithetical to the Republican spirit. There should only be one caucus, the Republican caucus. And it's been something I've been mulling over. Why do you think it's necessary for the the most conservative legislators to band together in a faction instead of just being unified in one big happy Republican family?
Oops, I was on mute. That is a good question. Is it necessary? I could go, I don't know if it's necessary or not. It wouldn't be necessary. Let me back it up. It would not be necessary to differentiate ourselves as a group of committed conservatives who are dedicated to the not like blindly, we have exceptions, but we essentially say, hey, the Idaho State Republican platform is our North Star, right? There's exceptions. That doesn't mean it's like a blind allegiance or anything like that. But like we're the Idaho GOP platform. That's what we're pushing. Now, if the Idaho Republicans actually believed in and supported the Idaho Republican platform, and a Freedom Caucus wouldn't be necessary. But as you and I both know, and this is just objective data, there's a study, I know you've written about it, I've written about it on my Substack, and so a lot of people have written about it. There's a study by the Institute for Legislative Analysis. It's not an Idaho group. They're an outside group who analyzes all 5,000 plus state legislators. And they did a study just based on voting records. I think they did a great job. And they found that Idaho has some of the most liberal Republicans in the entire nation. So if that wasn't the case, we wouldn't need a state Freedom Caucus, right? But that is the case. And so I think it's necessary to shine the light on the corruption, on what's going on in the state house. So we don't just go in there and vote and argue and fight for conservative principles. We also go in there and shine a light on the corruption, right? And that's why you saw 3 members of the Freedom Caucus last year. That's why you had the pro tem remove myself from my vice chairmanship. Now, that doesn't mean I lose my seat on the committee or lose a vote. I'm still on the committee. My vote still counts the same as it did beforehand. All it does is make me not the vice chair. It doesn't change the votes and things like that. But Scott Herndon got threatened and reprimanded like a child. And Senator Zeidervelt also was removed from her committee. And I think for myself, I didn't even get a reason why. I just got a letter in the mail, no phone call, no, nothing. And they don't like the fact, in my opinion, they don't like the fact that we're exposing what they're doing, the overspending, the ridiculous growth of government. From pre-pandemic to now, we had an $8.3 billion budget pre-pandemic. Now we're somewhere around 14 billion in just 4 years, 5 years. They don't like the fact that we're exposing what they're doing behind the scenes. So that's what the Freedom Caucus does. We fight for the people, not the lobbyists, not the bureaucrats, not the governor. And I think it's helpful. And I think we've had a warm reception in Idaho. And I mean, there's a sportsman's caucus. There's a lot of different caucuses. It's not just Republican, Democrat, Freedom Caucus, and then you have a group of liberal Republicans who call themselves the Main Street Caucus or Main Street Group, whatever, Main Street Idaho, whatever they call themselves. But there's more than that. There's I'm a member of the Sportsman's Caucus, people who like hunting and fishing. So should we do away with that? But I think it's helpful. People appreciate it. Conservative Idahoans appreciate it. The moderates and the liberals, not so much.
One thing I've noticed in talking with candidates from all across the state is that there are significant differences in how people in different parts of the state view things, from the role of government to, spending, to basically everything. And, you mentioned the Idaho Freedom Caucus and then the Main Street Caucus. In some ways, they're very regional too. There's, no member of the Freedom Caucus east of Senator Zeiderveld in District 24. On the other hand, there's only 2 or 3 members of the Main Street Caucus who are, west and north of Boise. So there's some regional stuff going on there. But where does your district fit in? First, I want to say that looking at the district maps, I never noticed that District 13 looks like a backwards Idaho. But what are the unique challenges of District 13 in Nampa, and what are the priorities that you're hearing from when you go to talk to people?
Yeah, we do look like a backwards Idaho. So District 13 in Nampa, and I would say most of I would say Canyon County is one of the most conservative counties in the state, up there with like Kootenai. It's a very, just people are very deep red conservative, whereas more people in more southeast Idaho, and there's some, obviously Boise, and there's some pockets up north are very purple or blue, but that's definitely not Nampa. So Nampa's very everyday conservative, just regular people, just like myself. A lot of the priorities, like the things I'm hearing about, some of them kind of span the whole state, but education is up there. What are we going to do to fix the failing public schools? School choice. People want more freedom in education. How do we, anything education related seems to be one of the top issues. The and this could be kind of under the educate. This is the second one, and these aren't really in orders of importance, but the second one is the woke stuff. People are very mindful of all of this woke stuff being pushed on us by the left, pushed on our kids mostly. People in Nampa are very aware of that. People do not want that. Whether it's the gender bending stuff, whether it's, obscene materials in libraries, whether it's the, social emotional learning and critical race theory and DEI being pushed in the schools. That's very top of mind for people in Nampa as well. I don't view these as a 1, 2, 3. I view them as a, linear. They're kind of all top priorities. And then these kitchen table issues that I know this is most of the state, but property taxes in Nampa are ridiculous compared to like some other cities. Property taxes, housing, groceries, gas, gas prices, those inflation. I know that's hitting all of the state, but those are kind of the three kind of economic issues. Like, why do we have a grocery tax? Because current leadership wants us to have a grocery tax. I had a bill last year to get rid of the grocery tax and phase it out in 2 years. So instead of just cutting it off, it would cut it by 50%, and then the second, kind of a slow fade. It couldn't even get a hearing. They wouldn't even let me present it. Why do we have a grocery tax? Why can't we have like Tammy Nichols had a great bill. It was like a gas tax holiday. Like on this date, or I forgot, I don't know, but basically it was like on this date or these days, there's no gas tax, or like a month or something like that. There's tons of ideas to fix property taxes. People can't afford to live. And I know that's not unique to Nampa, but those are kind of the three kind of big areas I think that I'm hearing. Well, I think that I know that's what I'm hearing from people. And it's all the stuff I ran on 2 years ago, there's still issues. So it's not like these things have gone away. And that's why we're fighting for them, actively fighting for them in the State House.
Well, property tax is a complicated issue, but with limited time, I want to switch back to education, schools. Obviously, that's a big issue in Nampa, Canyon County, and everywhere really, and everywhere has different challenges there. But since you sit on the Senate Education Committee, you have a unique perspective. Last year, you co-sponsored a bill to create education savings accounts, and that died on the Senate floor. This year, over on the House side, they had a tax credit bill that would give money back to parents for enrolling their children in private schools or certain other options, and that did not even get out of committee. So obviously, you support some form of money following the child to perhaps create competition in the public school system and give parents and families more options. How do we get something through Idaho? Other states have done it.
The answer is really easy. We elect more conservatives, principled conservatives with moral courage and tenacity and backbone. The problem we have, and I've said a version of this, and I don't, have you listened to the Joe Rogan interview with Tucker Carlson?
Yes.
So good. So good. I listened to it last week. And it was encouraging because I'm like, that's what I've been beating that on some of the issues, that same drum. The biggest problem we have, and if people watching this, if you want to list, if you have 3 hours to kill, whether you're driving somewhere or working on something in the garage or whatever, or just listen to it in chunks, Tucker Carlson on Rogan was a really good. I think it was really good, but he highlights the problem of weak men in leadership. So the biggest problem we have, and this isn't just politicians, this is bureaucrats and everyone else, but it's the politicians who make policy, right? We haven't, the real pandemic, like I said, when we first started, is we have a corrupt bureaucratic empire. Not unique to Idaho, but it is happening in Boise and every other state house in the nation. Washington, D.C. has a swamp, and every state capital has its own swamp. And the corrupt bureaucratic empire preys on weak men to do their bidding. So how do we get school choice? How do we get rid of the grocery tax? How do we get, there's so many good bills. Unless you have a specific question, we could sit here for 10 hours and talk about the good and bad bills and what made it and what didn't. But I know that's been covered ad nauseum all over the place. But the way to get good conservative bills through is to get good conservative people elected. Otherwise, we have weak men who become vessels for corruption and wickedness and evil, oftentimes unknowingly, and that's not going to be me. I'd rather lose an election than become some puppet for the bureaucracy. But that's how we get school choice through. We get more people who believe in school choice elected. We get more conservatives elected. And it's not enough to just go in there and vote the right way. We need people who are going to lead the charge. We need fighters. We need people who are going to go in there and fight for these things. Because there's also, people who are conservatives and they vote mostly the right way, but they don't fight for anything. They don't debate bills. They never speak up or speak out. And so because of that, a lot of their own constituents don't really know what they've been up to, or they're not making known what they're doing. So they might get voted out because they're not really making waves. So we need to get rid of the weak men and replace them with principled people who have moral courage. That's the answer. And that's politics everywhere, I think, not just Idaho.
Well, one issue that I think is a unique issue Idaho faces, or maybe other states do as well. Something you touched on there with the swamp, or the bureaucracy. The legislative branch is supposed to be co-equal with the executive branch, but you and your 104 colleagues are elected every 2 years to serve part-time, and you're paid part-time, so you really need to have a business or retirement money or be financially independent somehow. And you come in there for 3 months. Meanwhile, and you have to evaluate hundreds and hundreds of bills that'll come before you every year, in committees, on the floor, not to mention, pushing your own legislation. Meanwhile, the executive branch is full-time. The governor's full-time. All the elected officers are full-time. They have really large full-time staffs that can craft, presentations of why we need this bill, why we need this rule, why we need this appropriation. And then, of course, all the lobbyists come in as well. And it really, my sense is that legislators are at a disadvantage. How do we overcome that? I don't necessarily want to see a full-time legislature, because that just creates career politicians. But how do you shift the balance of power back to the representatives of the people and away from the permanent political bureaucracy?
It's the same answer. I think so. I'm not going out to lunch and dinner and being wined and dined by lobbyists all the time. I think during this 2024 legislative session, I could count on one hand kind of the times I went out to lunch with someone, and it was more just because it's like, hey, I'll take a free lunch. Like, if you're going to buy me steak, where are we going? I'll listen to you talk, and I'm going to eat steak and have a nice day. I think it's all by design. You summed up you laid it out perfectly. We have a full-time bureaucracy. Some are elected, some are appointed, some have worked there for 20 years. And then we show up to the lobbyists. even to the good ones, which there are a handful of good ones, um, to lobbyists, we are cattle. Legislators are cattle. We show up every 3 months. They hook their wagon and they find someone who will, carry their agenda, hook their wagon to that legislator, and they push it through. So I think it's all by design. It's not even I think it's by design. You have I would not be interested at all in being a full-time legislator. I would not want to do it. Um, but I don't know if we can shift the power back. I mean, I think that's a good insight there is, politics is about one thing. It's about the adjudication of power. And when citizen legislators like Idaho part-time legislators go in there and try to take some of that power from the bureaucracy and use it to help the people, they don't like that. No one likes having power taken away from them, and that's why there's hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent against just a handful of political conservatives. I'm sorry, political races in 2024. They don't like that we're going in there and kind of taking the power back and using it to benefit people, not the bureaucracy. But man, how do we change it? Think about it. I mean, you're someone who's worked in the Capitol, and this is good and bad people. There's good people who work there. There's people who I'm not a fan of. There's lots of people who work in state government. But if you're a bureaucrat or a government employee who's worked there 10, 20 years, and then I just show up for 3 months and then I go away, and then I come back next year and show up for 3 months and go away, we're at a huge disadvantage. We don't have any staff. We don't have anyone. It's just me, right? We don't when we're in session, we have attaches, and they'll like, but they're just kind of there to kind of help you do your job. But yeah, I think it's designed that way on purpose, where legislators are cattle. Even to the good lobbyists, we're just cattle, and we're there to, they try to put as much stuff in the wagon as they can and have us pull it onto the floor and up to the governor's office. But yeah, it's a tough battle. I don't know how we fix it. I think the way to fix it. So I'm a fan of term limits. It'll never happen. It happened in Idaho. I forgot. I don't know if you know what year they did that. What
Uh,
year was that? Do you remember? Like 2008 or something like that?
it was
Or
early 2000s.
yeah, they did. It was a ballot initiative, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm a fan of term limits for state level and for at the state level and in Congress. It'll never happen because it did happen in Idaho. And then it got to the legislature and they said, nah, we don't want term limits. That's why I think ballot initiatives, we just need to gut that whole process. But that's another conversation, because at the end of the day, it ends up in the hands of the legislature anyway. And they're going to do what they want to do with it. But I'm a fan of term limits, and people say, well, no, your term limit is your vote. And I understand that argument. I'm not a hardcore term limit guy. I'm past the 50% mark, because yeah, it's like some good legislators would get termed out, but you don't get career politicians with term limits. You don't get a Nancy Pelosi with term limits. You don't get Mitch McConnell. And I know I'm talking about Congress, and if there's term limits, we get fresh blood every few years, and I'm a fan of that. Will it ever happen? I don't think so. So it's like, well, how do we work within the system? How do we play the game within the parameters that are given to us and be effective and overcome some of this stuff? Again, we elect people with moral courage and tenacity who have principles, because even in that system, if we have enough legislators who stick to their guns and don't sell out to lobbyists and don't kowtow to the bureaucrats, we could still win in the current system. Like, I look at Tennessee's legislature does a bunch of the stuff that we want to do, and it just can't get done. Like, I look at other states. What's the state I'm thinking of? New Hampshire has a lot of good legislation they push through. There's a lot of states who have part-time legislatures who are doing really cool conservative things in a similar system that we have in Idaho. It's just, we got to make sure we put the right people in office. So.
Well, on that note, I appreciate your time. So I'm sure you have a lot of work to do, doors to knock, fish to catch. So do you have any closing thoughts?
just for people to bookmark May 21st. It's and people watching your podcast probably already know this because the people who watch your podcast are typically more involved and kind of they know what time it is and where we're at as a state. But, the Idaho Republican primary is where most of our legislative uh, victories are had or lost. So the Republican primary is the election for like 80% of the state. So it's really important that people come out and vote on May 21st. Bookmark it, tell your friends. Early voting, I think, starts next week, doesn't it?
Next Monday. Well, next
May
Monday as of this
6th.
recording.
Yeah, I think it starts on May 6th. You can do early voting. You can do absentee voting. I'm a big fan of voting in person. Whereas my opponent is voting absentee. He's voting absentee ballot, and that's we're not going to go down the rabbit hole of why the moderate Republicans are pushing absentee voting so hard, but show up and vote in person, May 21st. Bookmark it, circle it, write it on your whiteboard, set a reminder on your phone. It's so important because we're this close to losing Idaho. And if people don't show up and vote the right people in office, we're going to lose it, and we have no one to blame but ourselves.
Brian Lenney, state senator from District 13. Thank you.